Hello, everyone. I was born in 1965 in Tehran, Iran. And back then, Iran was not an Islamic republic. We had a king, and we called him the Shah. I grew up in a Christian family in downtown Tehran. 98% of the population of Iran at the time were Muslim. And the remainder 2% were Baha'i, Zoroastrian, Christian, and Jewish. I'm from a Christian family. My father was a ballroom dancing in Tehran, and my mother was a hairdresser. So I literally grew up between the sounds of the cha-cha and the tango and women with really big poofy hair. Growing up as a teenager in Iran, we owned a cottage by the Caspian Sea where I spent my summers. Right before the revolution in 1978, I had turned 13, so I had a green polka dot bikini that I used to wear on the beach, boys and girls together. We would listen to the tunes of the Bee Gees on our boombox, and I would be reading Jane Austen and Ernest Hemingway and watching The Little House on the Prairie every Friday night, dubbed into Farsi. And I would be living a life, I guess, like a teenager would in the West, but the difference was that I was in Iran. And I have many hopes and dreams. At the time, Iran was a very secular country. The laws were very secular. And a woman could become whatever she wanted. She could even become the prime minister. I wanted to become a medical doctor, marry Donny Osmond, and live happily ever after. That was the plan. And from my perspective, the road was clear, but it wasn't as clear as I wished it to be. We returned from the cottage to Tehran in 1978, and there was a tank parked at my door. And I asked my mother, what's that? I had never seen one before. I had lived in a very normal-looking neighborhood all my life, and my mom said, that's a tank. And I said, oh, are they shooting a movie? And she said, no, I think it's real. So it was real. I watched from my window as the revolution of 1979 unfolded on the streets of Tehran. The street would fill with angry demonstrators yelling death to the east and death to the west and death to everybody, basically. And they were really angry, and I couldn't understand where this anger was coming from. So I asked a friend of mine, he was 18, I asked him what's going on, and he said, well, the Shah, the king, is a dictator. Really? What is a dictator? And he said, well, if you speak against the government, you're going to be arrested, tortured, and maybe even executed. Really? That was news to me. My family had never been political growing up in Iran. I was happy with my Bee Gees and Little House on the Prairie. And I never felt that the Shah was a dictator, but it was reality. And this is why the people on the streets of Tehran were so angry. Ayatollah Khomeini had become the leader of this revolution, and he had promised the people of Iran freedom and democracy. And this is why the people were out there. They wanted a better life. So the revolution succeeded. The Shah was forced into exile. Ayatollah Khomeini returned to the country, and an Islamic republic was announced through a free referendum. 98% of the people of Iran, the Marxists and the liberals and the conservatives and everybody except the religious minorities voted yes to an Islamic republic. Why didn't we? Well, because if you're a Christian or a Jew or a Zoroastrian or Baha'i and they say an Islamic republic, your question is, how am I going to fit in that? And when I asked my friends on the street, how am I going to fit into your Islamic republic, nobody had an answer. Everybody said, you asked too many questions. It's going to be great. Okay. The revolution succeeded, and the schools had been shut down for a while. We returned back to the classroom, and at the beginning, everything kind of looked the same. We still have our maths and sciences and literature and geography, and we went back to class. Now, the old laws had been shoved out of the window, and the new laws were still being written. So we had a period in Iran, a period that comes after every revolution, where there is no law. And you can basically do whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. And this situation is sometimes mistaken with democracy, but it's really not that. So we were doing whatever we wanted. We were reading the works of Marx and Lenin that had been illegal during the time of the Shah, but now you could actually read them. We wanted a utopia. We wanted to make Iran a better place. And then things began to change. Now, I have to give you a footnote here. Horror in history doesn't happen overnight. It is not that you go to bed tonight and tomorrow you have Hitler, Stalin, or Mao, or Khomeini for that matter on your hands. No, it doesn't work that way. There are danger signs that happen here, and there are little things, our liberties. The liberties we had taken for granted are being taken away. So our liberties in Iran began being taken away, little by little. Not only the revolution did not deliver what it had promised, it began to take away our personal liberties. And by the way, let me just tell you, Hitler, for example, did not happen in the Middle East or in Africa. He had happened in a civilized part of the world where there was a democratic process in place. So if you think that here in Canada you are immune to horror, think again. In Iran, we began losing our liberties. Dancing and singing became illegal. Holding your boyfriend's hand in public became illegal. Wearing bright colors became illegal. Women had to now to cover up, and they had to wear the hijab, even if you were a Christian. And my generation got on the streets of Tehran as early as 1980 and protested. Why? Because we wanted to have fun. We wanted to wear the bikini. It wasn't such a big political deal. But did our parents join us? No, they didn't, because they were too busy paying their mortgages and car payments and arguing with their teenagers. So it was my generation, the 14, 15-year-olds on the streets of Tehran. And every single protest rally was attacked by the Revolutionary Guard, the new police of the revolution, and we were being shot at. But the world didn't take notice because most foreign journalists had been expelled from Iran. Then the wave of arrest of the mass wave of arrest of young people began in 1981. Young teenagers were being arrested left and right. I was arrested on January 15, 1982. I was about to take a bath. It was about 9, 10 o'clock at night. The doorbell rang. My mom called my name, and I opened the bathroom door, and there were 2 guns pointed in my face. People have asked me, were you scared? No, I was not, because fear is a luxury. I entered a state of shock. A state of shock is like body armor. You put it on, but it doesn't protect you against bullets. It protects you against emotion. My mom and dad were crying, and I couldn't understand why. It wasn't a big deal. I was getting arrested. The guards took me north to Evin prison. I was blindfolded upon arrival. Evin prison is right now 100% operational, and people are being tortured and being executed in there. I was taken in. Again, I was blindfolded. Eventually, someone called my name and took me for interrogation. I couldn't see the man who was speaking with me. He asked me, have you attended protest rallies against the government? Yes, I have. It wasn't some state secret. I was 16 years old. I went to protest rallies every day after school with my friends. Have you written articles against the government? Yes, I have written articles against the government in my school newspaper. And then he asked me, where is Shahrzad? Shahrzad was a girl I had met with her once. She was a member of a Marxist group, a friend of mine. I met with her after school one day. She asked me to join them, but I said no, because I had figured out that Marxism and Catholicism, I was a Catholic, they don't go that well together. So I didn't know where she was. She had gone into hiding, and I was caught. They took me to another room, and in this small room, they took off my blindfold. I was in a small room with 2 men, with Ali and Hamed. And there was a bare wooden bed, a desk, and 2 chairs. They handcuffed me. And I was 95 pounds back then. They realized my hands are going to slide out of the cuffs, so they put both of my wrists together, and they put the 2 in one cuff, and as it clicked, my right wrist cracked. And the torture had not even begun yet. At that point, if the devil appeared and said, Marina, sell me your soul, and I'm going to get you to your mom, I would have sold my soul with whipped cream on top. I would have done anything to go back home to my mother, but that was not an option. They tied me to the bare wooden bed. I was lying down on my stomach, and they lashed the soles of my feet with a length of cable. With every strike of the lash, your nerve ends are in your feet. My nervous system would explode, then it would be magically put back together, and I would be wide awake for the next strike. And you hope you die, but you don't. Torture, unlike what they tell you, is not designed to get information. No. Torture is designed to break the human soul. When they succeed, they stop. If they don't succeed, they will execute you. They beat me and beat me and beat me. If they had told me, confess you're Jesus Christ, I would have confessed I was Jesus Christ. But they wanted something I didn't know. Eventually they stopped. I sat up and I looked at my feet and I laughed out loud because they were like overgrown party balloons with toes on them the color blue. Then they made me walk, and then they would start all over again. Then they make you walk, they start all over again. Why stagger? Because if they continue beating you, the skin would break and you would die from bleeding and infection. The point of torture is not to kill you. There are much more economical ways to kill people. They want to kill you, they execute you, or they hang you. Torture is hard work. I was given a death sentence. Thousands of prisoners were entering a prison built for only a few hundred. What do you think they would do? They would let you go home? No, they would kill. Mass executions every single night. And then I was sent to the cell block with hundreds, thousands of other girls, 90% under the age of 20. 90%. So what would we do? We had one bathroom for 300 girls, so we would be standing in line all day. And then as we are standing, names are being announced over the loudspeaker, so and so and so, come to the office, and the girls who are being called, they would be tortured and maybe even executed. So we are standing there, and the names are being called. And what are we doing? Do we talk about social justice? No, we talked about everything that makes you human. And that is your happy memories, the memories of mom and dad and brother and sister, the memories of the people whom you love and who love you back, even though the world seems to have forgotten about you entirely. In Evin prison, some girls were being forced to marry their interrogators and torturers, and I was one of them. I was forced to marry one of my interrogators, and under the name of marriage, this man was raping me over and over again. He even took me on leaves of absence to visit his family, and I expected his mom to be the evil stepmother from Cinderella and torment me more, but this little woman, she came to the door and she took me to her kitchen, and all of the food in her fridge landed on the table in front of me, and she said, "I beg you, eat." And she explained to me that my tortured husband had been a political prisoner in Evin prison during the time of the Shah and had been tortured for 3 years, much more than I had been. And I thought, oh my gosh. They had forced me to convert to Islam in Evin. They had taken everything from me. They had taken away my family, my freedom, my dignity, my religion, and my name. How much more can you take away from somebody? But I realized victimhood is not a perpetual state. One day, the tables are going to turn, and somebody will put a length of cable in front of me and say, go for it. Go get your justice, but it's really revenge. What am I going to say to the length of cable? And I realized since the dawn of time, the torturer has become the victim, and the victim has become the torturer with no end in sight. Who's good? Well, the mic is, it's back on. Who even knows who's who anymore? It's unclear. Where is good and where is evil? Good and evil, they are connected to each other. They exist within each other. The man I was forced to marry was assassinated 15 months after our marriage. And I was released after 2 years, 2 months, and 12 days in Evin prison and went home. But for a long time, I thought about this monster that we call evil. This monster, this dragon, you cannot take a silver sword and just stab it in the heart, because evil feeds evil. This dragon, this monster, you have to stand in front of it, and you have to stand your ground. You have to look at it straight in the eye, and you have to say, I'm not afraid of you, and I will stand up to you. Do you remember that lone man in Tiananmen Square? That is where we have to be. I am a witness. I live to tell this story. I cannot create a time machine and go back and fix anything. But what I can do is to make sure that the world knows and remembers and that we don't fall into the trap of anger and hatred, because anger and hatred have taken too many lives. We have to change the way we look at justice. We have to change the way we see it, and we should never again mistake justice with revenge, because that is the way democracy dies before it's even born. Thank you so much.